The Mike Wagner Show is powered by Sonic Web Studios. If you're looking to start or upgrade your online presence, visit www.sonicwebstudios.com for all of your online needs. Sonic Web Studios specializes in custom web design, app development, social networking, search engine optimization, domain registration, email marketing, online stores, and more. Since our birth, we have been designing and developing immaculate websites and providing web solutions which are a cut above the rest. As a leading web designing enterprise, we have a team of extremely talented web designers who are well-focused and have the experience of working on multiple web developing platforms such as PHP, Magento, custom WordPress, and more. Sonic Web Studios has been helping businesses of all kinds, whether big, small, established, or startup, impress their audiences with exemplary web solutions. We don't just create beautiful and functional websites. We give you a complete online solution with the main goal of enhancing your yearly revenues. We aim to give your business the online exposure and brand acknowledgement that will help you in achieving increased conversions leading to profitable sales. Call 1-800-303-3960 or visit us online at www.sonicwebstudios.com to get started today. Mention the Mike Wagner Show and get 20% off your project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level.
Hey, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show. Thanks for tuning in to the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM. If you're interested in sponsoring my show, you can send me an email to the MikeWagnerShow@gmail.com, or you could also donate to the podcast. Just go to the Donate Listen site, and you can also donate whatever you like. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. For those who are interested, Anchor can give you everything you need in one place for free, which you can use right from your phone or computer. We got creation tools, allows you to record and edit podcasts so it sounds great, and they'll distribute the podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere. Spotify, Apple, Google, many more. And you can make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership. So download the Anchor app for free or go to Anchor FM to get started.
It's now time for the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. Mike brings you great guests and interesting people from all across the globe. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another great episode of the Mike Wagner Show.
Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition way. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at Facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, and over 35 podcast platforms. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with a wonderful author who is from Green Bay, Wisconsin, home of cheese curds, and everything cheese, including their beloved Green Bay Packers. Of course, talking about the new quarterback they love and could be happening in a couple of years. But she graduated from Edgewood College in Madison, also from University of Wisconsin Green Bay. She worked in the public sector for House of Representatives, worked in the school system, and she's also fascinated by some serial killers. And she's also a very avid food advocate. So basically, she just cooks some killer meals, has a killer cookbook, and of course talks about some of the people, what's called the Serial Cookbook, published by Simon & Schuster. Ladies and gentlemen, live from the city of Green Bay, and hoping the Packers get back to the Super Bowl and one day cook up for the Packers, but not for the serial killers. Ladies and gentlemen, live from Green Bay, Ashley Lecker. Ashley, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me. Excited to be on, and excited about the Packer enthusiasm and the serial killer cookbook enthusiasm too.
Well, I'm sure one day you'll be writing about a cookbook of what the Packers like to eat, especially Aaron Rodgers, the new quarterback Jordan Love, or even with their head coach Matt LaFleur, maybe Mike McCarthy from the past, and some of the other guys like the past Sterling Sharper. So, and first of all, you graduated from Edgewood College in Madison, and you attended University of Wisconsin Green Bay. You work in the public sector for House of Representatives. You work in the school system, and of course, you just have a tremendous interest in what the serial killers had as their last meal, and you decided to make a cookbook, thus called the Serial Cookbook Killer, which is out by Simon Schuster. And before we get into all that, tell us how I got started.
Yeah, that was so the Serial Killer Cookbook came about to me as my publisher and my editor, they approached me because one is I do recipe development. I have a blog. My blog is Cheese Curd in Paradise, and I write about true crime on there too. And they came to me and said, "Hey, we have, we want to put together a book that has recipes of last meals of people who were executed. Like, would you be interested in doing that?" And like the true crime enthusiast that I am, I was like, "Yeah, I would. I would love to do that." And so it was, my background was not initially in writing or doing. I mean, I went to school at Edgewood. I went to political science major, and I worked for the House of Representatives. I worked in nonprofit for Brown County up here in Green Bay, and then I also have a teaching license. I'm a teacher too, and so it kind of was this roundabout way that this. I was really lucky to have this kind of fall into my lap and that I got to do this project.
That sounds amazing as well, too. We'll talk about some of the recipes, what they like to have as their last meal, and what was that one moment influenced you into becoming a writer per se, especially with the Serial Cookbook Killer?
What was the influence for it?
It was like, what was the aha moment that you had?
Oh, like when I was going, when I wanted to make something that was really accessible to people, because not all true crime fans are people who cook, but a lot of true crime fans want to learn more about what people cooked. And so I wanted to make something that was accessible to anybody. And you don't have to be a cook or a chef or whatever to enjoy this book. You can enjoy the pictures, you can enjoy the recipes, you can enjoy, because there's a lot of trivia in here and a lot of information about these different crimes and these people. And for me, the aha moment was that I could make something that would appeal to true crime lovers like myself, and also people who love food and recipes also like myself, and to be able to bring those two worlds together was super fun.
It sounds like super fun. And how'd you first get involved with true crime?
Well, I have been a person who has followed different cases, read about true crime since I was probably in high school, I think, when I started reading about different people or different crimes. And just throughout my life, it's been something that I followed. I will read about it, or there's tons of documentaries out there. There's a ton of true crime podcasts out there of listening and reading, and it's just always been something I've enjoyed doing. And so I've been doing that just as kind of something I liked for a long time. And then it slowly developed into me writing about it on my blog every so often, to being approached by a publisher to say, "Hey, we think you'd be a good fit for this. Are you interested?" And I think, "Yeah, I am." So, and then about a year later, then this cookbook is now hitting the show.
That is fantastic. What's your favorite true crime story?
So my favorite, oh my goodness. Okay. Well, there's one, I'm not sure if it's my favorite, but it's one that I've been reading about recently. And it's because it's a Green Bay one. And the reason I've been reading about it recently is that one of the people who was convicted of the crime was coming up for release, or for parole, I should say, more recently. And that was the Back 40 murders, which was in the 1980s in Green Bay. And was a particularly gruesome murder of a young woman. That was followed by the community. There's some books that have been written about it. And so that was one that I've been reading more about lately, just because it is kind of a hometown crime for this area, and that it has it essentially sort of resurged within the past year in this area because because people are coming up for parole who were convicted of that murder.
Mm-hmm. And what do you suppose his last meal would have been?
Oh, of those people. Well, there are four of them, I believe, and they're still, not sure if they're all still alive. But as far as like for true crime from my book, of my favorite last meal that I have in the book, the first last meal that I created, or the first recipe that I created for this book, was something from John Wayne Gacy's last meal, which one of the things that John Wayne Gacy requested was a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Ooh, yummy. You're making me hungry already. He managed the Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'd have to go back and check whether it was owned or managed, what the correct word use would be there. But he requested a bucket of chicken. And that was the first recipe that I made for this book, was a crispy fried chicken. And to me, that's one of my favorite recipes in this book, mainly because it was the first one, and because it does have some backstory to it of who he was as a person, of why he requested that. And so that's one of my favorites from my book. But yeah, and I think he was one of the people that we obviously were going to put in this book, because people know who John Wayne Gacy is. Most people do, as well as other ones that are a little more prolific in this book, like Ted Bundy and also Timothy McVeigh. But there's a lot of lesser known people in the book as well. Mm-hmm. And also, do they have the 11 herbs and spices in your homemade version?
Actually, yeah. I've been asked that before, and there is not the 11 herbs and spices in that. So it's a little bit of a twist on my rendition of crispy fried chicken.
Ooh, my. That sounds very, very delicious, and I've got it right here. And, of course, we'll get into more about some of the other serial killers' last dishes and how you can make them. But first, listen to The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition way. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, follow the Mike Wagner Show on themikewagnershow.com. You can check our Facebook page at facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, as well as over 35 podcast platforms. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here, author Ashley Lecker of The Serial Cookbook Killer, that is on Ulysses Press. It just came out recently here, and we talked about the last meal of John Wayne Gacy, having some Kentucky Fried Chicken as well as some deep fried shrimp, just making me hungry right now. And, of course, everybody knows about Ted Bundy, and what was his last meal?
So Ted Bundy, he didn't actually request his last meal. He was given it was kind of the meal they just gave as the last meal, sort of that standard last meal that he was given. And what he got was he was given steak, eggs, hash browns, toast, and milk, coffee, and juice. And he did not eat any of it. There wasn't, I think, in kind of Bundy fashion, that he did not partake. And so that was his last meal. But I do have in the book, I created a recipe in there for seared steak, and also for the eggs as well. So if people are creating the recipe at home, they can have their own copycat version of the seared seasoned steak that Mr. Bundy chose not to enjoy before his execution.
Huh.
So, yeah, so there's a couple that didn't partake in the last meal, and some people are just given the standard meal of that day, and some people order really extravagant meals, and that sometimes got them into some hot water at the state level because the state really wasn't a huge fan of spending a ton of money on food that somebody wasn't going to eat.
Mm-hmm. And also, what are some of the serial killers that requested extravagant meals, and what were some of the extravagant meals, and who happened to order them?
So one that I think of off the top of my head was Lawrence Russell Brewer. He was executed in 2011, and he ordered. So I'll read you what he ordered because it's a lot. He ordered 2 chicken fried steaks with gravy and sliced onions, a triple meat bacon cheeseburger with the fixers on the side, a cheese omelet with ground beef, tomatoes, onions, bell peppers, jalapenos, fried okra with ketchup, a pound of barbecue with half a loaf of white bread, 3 fajitas with the fixings, a meat lover's pizza, 3 root beers, 1 pint of Bluebell vanilla ice cream, a slab of peanut butter fudge with crushed peanuts. And that was his order, and he refused to eat any of it.
Oh, how come he refused to eat it? That was so extravagant. And if he was going to eat it, I was going to eat it.
Yeah, and actually after he refused to eat the meal, Texas stopped offering last meal requests statewide after that happened in 2011. And so they just stopped taking them. And, you know, his particular personality, I mean, he was never remorseful for his crimes. What he was executed for was dragging, essentially murder and torture and murder of a man named James Byrd, and it is classified as a hate crime of what he did. They dragged him till he was dead, but actually, one of the things that came out of that murder, aside from Texas stopping offering last meals, was that there was legislation passed in 2001 after the murder of Matthew Shepard that was joined with this. That was a Hate Crimes Prevention Act. So there was some, there were some things that came out of that particular crime that still ripples today with that Hate Crime Prevention Act.
Mm-hmm. And it was also one that that guy here who ordered pecan pie, who didn't eat it, but told officials he was going to save it for later. So just tell us about this character.
Oh, with the pecan pie, right?
Yeah, and I think it was who was it? Ricky Ray Rector.
Yeah, Ricky Ray Rector. So Ricky Ray Rector is interesting because there was a lot of controversy about Ricky Ray Rector because people were not quite convinced that Ricky Ray was competent, that there was questions about his competency, and also if he was, that he had some kind of a cognitive impairment that he maybe shouldn't be executed. And so one of the things he did was that after he had his meal, he had steak, fried chicken, he had Kool-Aid, and he had pecan pie. He didn't eat the pie, and he said he was saving it for later. And that was something that later on they cited as that was evidence that he had some diminished mental capacity because he just didn't understand the concept of what was about to happen to him. Mm-hmm. And because he did have, he had pretty extensive frontal lobe damage. And so he had, there was quite some controversy with him. Even Bill Clinton flew to Arkansas during his presidential campaign to make sure that this particular execution took place. And so there was a lot going on with his at that time. Mm-hmm. This was in the early 90s. It was when he was 1992. So there was some controversy with him whether he was able to really understand what was happening. And there's another one in here too that's like that I put in this book named Joe. And actually on the front cover of the book, it's a bowl of vanilla ice cream.
Ooh, yummy. I am so hungry for that, but go ahead.
That ice cream was ice cream from Joe Arity. That is his bowl of ice cream. He is a person who is one of the only people in the book who really has been, it's widely believed at this point now that he gave a false confession. And he was a person who was executed before he was charged with murder, and he did suffer from mental illness, and he had a low IQ, and it was questioned quite thoroughly that he did not understand what he was being charged with, but he still confessed to the crime, and he was eventually executed. But people still believe that was likely a false confession that he gave.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and do you think
that was a while ago? I mean, that was in 1939. So, I mean, that was not recent.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like there's a lot of gap between 1939 and 1992, and with these the whole lack of mental capacity in these serial killers ought to be executed. Do you think the lack of mental capacity has changed the ways they do death row executions or anything like that? Whoops. I think we lost our connection here. Anyway, we're going to be getting back with Ashley Lecker in just a minute, but first listen to The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com. Actually, I think we have you back on. I think we got cut off here. So, as you were saying, and
yeah, that was good. Yeah. Yes. Well, the question was does mental capacity play an issue? I mean, there's more, I think, just with what we know about and research that's gone into mental illness, of how, because not everybody that commits crimes is mentally ill. I mean, but it certainly can play a part. And, we know more than we did in 1939. So it certainly is something I think that's looked at more than it would have been at that time.
Mm-hmm. And also, too, we also have another serial killer who requested homemade SpaghettiOs, and this guy was really upset. He got a can of regular spaghetti with meatballs, and he used the last statement to air his grievances. And tell us more about this guy. Homemade SpaghettiOs. Yeah. I remember getting that as a kid.
Right. I know. That is Thomas Grasso. He was really mad about the SpaghettiO issue because he requested SpaghettiOs. He was not given SpaghettiOs, though. He was given a can of regular spaghetti with meatballs. That was not what he wanted. He wanted SpaghettiOs. And so with his last statement, because typically they're allowed to make a final statement if they choose to before the execution, he said that, I did not get my SpaghettiOs. I got spaghetti, and I want the press to know this. He was very upset. He wanted to air that grievance, and he did so with his last words of airing the grievance of the SpaghettiO. I mean, but you know what? I guess, and I always thought this one was kind of funny too, just because, I mean, I think we all ate SpaghettiOs and probably canned spaghetti as kids. And there is definitely a difference between SpaghettiOs and canned spaghetti.
A huge difference as a kid is you're happy to get something as well too. And we'll also talk about some very unusual ones and a little bit disgusting in just a minute right here. I advise everybody not to have a 7-course over this one, but first listen to The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition way. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support at sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at facebook.com/the Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, and over 35 podcast platforms. Check the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with author Ashley Lecker of the Serial Cookbook Killer here on the Mike Wagner Show, and we round off a few interesting recipes and a few delicious recipes by some serial known killer, and also maybe some that are questionable, and we went from amazing to regular to unusual, and now some rather disgusting ones, and maybe you might want to hold off on the pizza, hold off on the 7-course, and just kind of brave your stomach on this one. Maybe tell us about some of the more disgusting last meals requested by serial killers.
Yeah, so one of the things that they, some of it is just the large consumption, which we talked about, Lawrence Russell Brewer. There also was, there are other people who just had some really strange requests too. And I think the one that I think about that always, that kind of I'm always just like, is there's a person in this book named Francis Crowley. Francis Crowley is interesting for a couple of reasons, because he was 19 when he was executed. But he's also sort of that quintessential 1930s gangster, too. And he requested for his last meal, he wanted a bowl of melted ice cream and regular ice cream. And I always thought that was kind of weird. Like, because, I don't know, it was just one of those things that always sort of struck me as weird. But I guess that's how he liked his ice cream. So,
and we also have a guy here that requested a single olive, which is unpitted. Maybe you can just tell us about that.
Yeah, that was Robert Anthony Buell requested a single unpitted olive. And what I did with that for the book, because I was thinking about how can I make this into a tangible recipe, is I did a single olive tapenade that you could do on toast, or if you could do, however you would like to eat it, but it uses green olives versus tapenades many times will use maybe a couple different types of olives. And so he was executed in 2002, and he was a person who murdered quite a few young children. And so he was very weird and creepy, and so his last meal request was equally creepy, of just wanting a single unpitted olive versus a normal meal. I think it was kind of just him underlining his strangeness.
And you also have in here Philip Workman, who requested a veggie pizza to be delivered to a homeless person. Can you just tell us about that?
Yeah, so Philip Workman, he didn't even request a meal for himself. What he wanted was a veggie pizza to be delivered to a homeless person. Like, that's what he wanted. And they would do it. But what happened was because the state went on at the request, but there was people across the country that sent numerous vegetarian pizzas to homeless shelters in his name after that. So it was kind of this strange ripple effect that happened. He was also a person who his execution was stayed for a period of time, but then ultimately he was executed later that year because he tried to appeal several times. But yeah, the pizza was ultimately there was quite a few vegetarian pizzas that were delivered to homeless shelters in his name after that request was made.
Wow, that was something as well too, and of course going through this cookbook as well too, and I think the one that stands out as well too, that besides the fried chicken, the seared steak, and whatever else, the thing I seem to like is for breakfast, biscuits and sausage gravy, green onion and peppercorn drop biscuits from Alton Coleman. Tell us about it and how you make some good biscuits and gravy.
Yeah, those are good. Those are really good. So Alton Coleman was in the early 2002, and through the and that's when he was executed. But then some of his crimes within the next couple of years, he's a spree killer, and he had an accomplice, and he was going through the Midwest, is where the majority of his crimes were committed. And so he was ultimately executed in Ohio, even though he committed crimes in multiple states. And one of the things he requested steak and chicken and also salad and pie, but he also wanted biscuits and gravy. So I created a kind of a recipe that you could use two ways. That one, if you want to use refrigerated biscuits, if that's your thing, if you're not a baker, that there's a recipe just to use how to make the pork sausage gravy, which is creamy and it's also thicker and it's peppered and it's seasoned. But then I included a recipe, which is one of my favorite biscuit recipes, which is for drop biscuits, which means that the difference between a drop biscuit and like the circular biscuits, drop biscuits, you do not need to have a biscuit cutter or roll out your dough. You're essentially just dropping them in the pan. You can bake them and then you eat them. Just kind of they're just a little more freeform. And these are really good. I make them with green onions, and they also have a little Greek yogurt in there to make them kind of creamy. And they have salt, pepper, and also, of course, butter. So they're really delicious with that pork sausage gravy poured right on top.
That sounds delicious. And of course, Peter Curtin, fried potatoes and onions, homemade German schnitzel, and tell us how to make a good German schnitzel, especially for Peter Curtin.
Yeah, for Peter Curtin, he is. Let me just flip to him. He was one of the people who is not from the United States, who I included on here, but I wanted to include some of the recipes because he ordered 2 portions of Wiener Schnitzel and also fried potatoes and wine. Like, he wanted a bottle of wine, and he was called the Vampire of Dusseldorf. Like, he was like a pretty intense, violent criminal that he admits to about 68 total crimes. There's potentially more, but he was a pretty violent guy. And so, but one thing to do is fried potatoes. So really simple recipe for this. You could do this as a side dish for dinner. You could also have this as, breakfast, and it's russet potatoes, butter, chopped onion, salt, and pepper, and a little bit of paprika, which is not like a traditional German spice, but it is really good on fried potatoes. It gives them just it gives a nice seasoning to them. And then, of course, the homemade German schnitzel, which it's a pretty easy recipe to come together because the meat is really thin. And so it cooks nice and fast. We use pork steak and then just a really simple coating, and that you can saute that. And then, of course, the schnitzel, some lemon, which is really delicious, and just kind of breaking up the heaviness of a fried meat with just a little citrus is really great.
That sounds delicious. And what is the most challenging meal to make out of that cookbook, and from what serial killer?
Oh, okay. Well, you know what I would say, I think the most challenging, because I really tried to make these all pretty comprehensive so that even if somebody was not a cook, that they could still do this. Sometimes cakes can be a little, there's definitely a learning curve with baking because ovens can be different. There's a lot of different factors. So sometimes that can be, but I think overall, the other thing that has a big learning curve on it, but the more you do it, the easier and easier it gets, is when you're learning how to fry something. Like in this one, I have John Wayne Gacy's fried chicken and deep fried shrimp, is that you're learning how to make sure your oil temperature is right, which is for this type of frying, 350 is a really good place to be at. And also making sure that you are letting your food fry so that it's crisp and cooked so that it will turn so you don't rip off some of that batter. And then also using a meat thermometer. Anytime you're cooking, meat, I always say use a meat thermometer. Do not cut into that. Use a meat thermometer that you love, that you trust, because your food will just be better. And it will not, you don't need to cut into stuff to see if it's done. A meat thermometer will help you do that. Mm-hmm. And so I think sometimes with some of those things, it's just practice makes perfect. Mm-hmm. And the more you practice and use good techniques like keeping oil the right temperature, using meat thermometers, you're going to have great results.
Mm-hmm. And also too, speaking of desserts, Timothy McVeigh had a really unusual question to tell us about what he requested as his last so-called meal.
Yeah, he wanted ice cream.
Really?
He wanted ice cream, and that's funny because when I was getting this book together, I looked at what the meals were. And I didn't necessarily, there was, of course, there was a couple big, the bigger hitters of here that people know, like the John Wayne Gacy, Bundy, that type. I wanted to include those people. But some of the other meals were chosen because I went through and I wanted there to be a variety. And here, a lot of these people are Southern, so there's a lot of Southern food in here. But the biggest thing that I saw people asking and requesting was by far ice cream. So many ice creams or milk, form of ice cream, whether it be melted ice cream, normally scooped out of a container, or a milkshake of some kind. Ice cream was by far, and that's what Timothy McVeigh had. He had 2 pints of mint chip ice cream, and that was his final meal. That's what he requested. He just wanted ice cream.
Oh, my goodness.
So I created, and all the ice cream recipes that I have in this particular book, these are no churn recipes. And so you do not need to own an ice cream maker to make them. Just because we don't all have one. And so it's nice to be able to do a no churn, which normally an ice cream maker will churn the ice cream and kind of roll it over, but these are no churn that you can just, as long as you have a freezer safe container, that they can be made and then frozen in your freezer for you to use.
That is amazing. I've got one myself, too. I'll have to make some ice cream after this as well, too. I'll have to be careful not to do the Timothy McVeigh kind. But, and of course, another question as well, too. It's like, how many inmates that you know are serial killers have requested cheese curds?
Not to my knowledge. I don't know of any, unless there's some really random ones that are out there I just haven't been able to dig up yet and see. But, that would be, they're missing out on something delicious.
and of course, I'd like to have you back on as well, too, and talk more about the serial killers and their favorite dishes as well, too. You really made me hungry. I'm going for the fried chicken, to be honest with you. So that's my first one. And of course, I'm going to throw this question out there, and I'll confess to mine. It's like, if I were to have a last meal, whatever it is, I'd rather have steak and potatoes. And how about you?
That is like, and it's funny, that question, I'm always just like, what am I in the mood for? Which I wonder if how much is that was true for these people. They're like, what am I really in the mood for? Like, what are you in the mood for? But I think, I live in Wisconsin. We are cheese people. I would want some cheese curds, and I would really want a brat with sauerkraut. And I think I'd want you to throw in some spaghetti too, because I really love pasta. That's such a weird mishmash of things, but I think that's what I'd order.
And of course, don't forget the SpaghettiOs as well too. Not spaghetti with meatballs in a can, SpaghettiOs.
Right, SpaghettiOs. I know. I was team SpaghettiO when I was growing up. So I mean, I can empathize with that frustration of if you were given a can of spaghetti versus SpaghettiOs. Not empathize with the person so much, but definitely a taste difference.
Oh, that is something as well too. And of course, you got a gentleman who just want fries, or two of them. Just tell us about these guys. Who just wanted fries?
Yeah, there was. I have a French fry recipe in here, and they ordered because and within the book, some of the recipes are linked together because many times there are more things than just what I wrote about, or the there's a couple where I did full trays, but some of them were just pieces of those meals. And one of those was Perry Smith and Richard Hickok, which I did a homemade French fry recipe for them. And the interesting thing about homemade French fries is that there is a little bit of pussiness to it, but as long as, with homemade French fries, it's really important to kind of do a double cook on them, because that's where you really get that nice crispiness to French fries, and to cut them thin too, so you get those really crispy, like, double arches style crispy French fries. And so that's always, and really making sure checking your oil temperature. Like anytime you're frying, for as much as what I learned doing this book, anytime you're frying, checking oil temperature is so key, because if your oil's too cold, you're not going to get good stuff. If it's too hot, you're going to burn stuff really fast. And these two people, this particular recipe, they ordered shrimp French fries, garlic bread, ice cream, and then some strawberries. Perry Smith and Richard Hickok are they spoke to the author Truman Capote. He interviewed them extensively for his book In Cold Blood.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that's where those two are. And so that was, and they were both executed by hanging in the 1960s, but they developed kind of a relationship with Capote as the interviews went on. So very interesting. But yeah, that was the meal that they had, is they had French fries and shrimp, which in this book we do have under Gacy's, is because under the last part of each recipe there's a serve with suggestion. And here we have a serve with deep fried shrimp, and we also have baked herb butter garlic bread, and we also have no churn vanilla ice cream. And so you can create that meal from different parts of this book.
That sounds fascinating. I'm going to have a seared steak with fried chicken afterwards. Thanks for making me hungry. I'm going to go have some afterwards. You can share some with me. All right. Once again, author Ashley Lecker of the Serial Cookbook Killer here on the Mike Wagner Show. Just a couple more things. Who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
My biggest influence in my career, when I think about like people who put themselves out there, those are my influences. And I come from a family I have two grandmothers who were theater people. One of my grandmothers was an opera singer. My mom was really, is into theater, and a lot of community rights and education advocacy. And those are people who are really who influence me. My sister, who, puts herself out there, she is primary in a small business and so people who put themselves out there, because that's for me when I was writing this book, I'm putting myself out there in a way that I had not done before. And so for me, looking at those people and seeing that how much success and how much fun can be obtained from A, being yourself, and B, doing something that you really are having fun with. And those were two things that I take away from those 4 people.
Mm-hmm. That is amazing as well, too. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
So if you're a person if you're a person who is into recipe development, if you're a blogger, or if you're wanting to write a cookbook, keep your ideas fresh, keep yourself motivated, read a lot, because you never know who is going to be reading your stuff. You never know who is on the other side of that screen, because for me, it was people who were willing to offer me this really great opportunity. And you never know who it's going to be. So just make sure that you're aware and that you're putting your best self out there, like doing something that's genuine, that's unique, and that's you.
Mm-hmm.
And good things come that way. We're all different, and we're not everyone is everyone's cup of tea. But when you find someone who likes what you're putting out, it's good things can happen.
And of course, lastly, I forgot to ask as well earlier, who's your favorite writer? Who are your favorite writers growing up? Yes.
My favorite writer is, let's see. I love Kurt Vonnegut. That's my favorite writer. If I had to pick, one of my favorite books I read is A Man Without a Country, which is a book that Kurt Vonnegut wrote a little bit later in life, and it's fantastic. And that's one of my favorite books. I also am a really big fan of the book I'm reading right now that I'm really loving is because, you're from Wisconsin too, so Door County. There is a murder mystery series that takes place in northern Door County around Gills Rock and Washington Island. And so I'm reading that right now, which is really fun to read.
Wow, that is amazing. We'd love to have you back on sometime in 2020 and beyond, talk more about that and talk more about the recipes from the Serial Cookbook Killer. Once again, author Ashley Lecker here on the Mike Wagner Show. A big thank you for your time. You've been fantastic. You may be very hungry. I'm going to go cook right now. But first of all, just tell us about your upcoming projects, what's your website, how do people contact you, and where can people purchase your book?
Yeah, so the Serial Killer Cookbook is available Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I've seen a few copies that purchasers from eBay have bought. So really, most of the online book stores, you can get it there. And where if you want to contact me, you can always contact me through my blog. My blog is cheesecurdinparadise.com. And you are welcome to reach out to me if you have questions or anything like that. Or if you're just looking for recipes, I post recipes there too pretty often. Projects that I have upcoming there's some different themed summer and spring types of recipes that are coming up, and so some different brands that I'm excited to show people. And then also, I would like to be able to show a little bit more of the Serial Killer Cookbook too to my readers, because they have been my followers through Cheese Curd in Paradise have been awesome. Have been really excited about this, and so I'm happy that they're finally getting to see it along with everybody else.
Sounds great, and we're looking forward to the cheese curds as well too. Ashley, a big thank you for your time. You've been fantastic. Looking forward to having you again soon. Do us a favor, keep us up to date, and I'm looking forward to your cooking as well too, especially with the cheese curds and the fried chicken and everything. We'd love to have you back. You've been fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and themikewagnershow.com. Please support our program with your donations at themikewagnershow.com. Join us again next time for another great episode of The Mike Wagner Show.